So we're going to get into this new book fully. I have read from this book little parts of it in previous videos, but we're going to go ahead and get a full chapters now. If you guys don't mind. And this book is called The American Discovery of Europe. All right. Yes. Again, The American Discovery of Europe, the other way around, by Jack D. Forbes. You guys know this author from other books. We're going to go to chapter 1 of this book, and it says here, Americans across the Atlantic, Galway, and the certainty behind Columbus' voyage. Sometime during the 1470s, a group of Native Americans followed the Gulf Stream from the Americas to Ireland. All right? We don't know if they were from the Caribbean region or from North America. We don't know if their journey was intentional or if they were driven eastward by a storm. What we do know is that 2 or more Americans, at least a man and a woman, reached Galway Bay, Ireland, and were there seen by Cristoforo Columbus. All right, he met them. All right, remember we've talked about this before. We're talking about Salvador Fernandes Zarco, the Portuguese Jew. You guys already know. Long prior to his famous voyage in 1492, so way before Columbus came to America, he had already encountered American Indians in Ireland, guys. We've gone over this. This momentous event, largely ignored by European historians, marks a beginning of the modern age, since it is precisely because of this experience that Columbus possessed the absolute certainty that he could sail westward to Cathay, Katayo, or China and India. So shout out to 432 The Draw Radio once again. Why am I saying that? Cathay, right? Catan, Cathay, Yucatan, Catan, Cathay. And then when we're talking about India, what India? India Superior, one of the 3 Indias. Remember, there was 3 Indias in medieval times. It is true, of course, that Columbus later learned of many arguments favoring the possibility of being able to sail directly westward from Europe to Asia. Most of these arguments were based upon logic, though, and not upon actual concrete evidence. They were arguments derived from books that Columbus studied and annotated, or from conversations and correspondence. It is significant that all of the hard evidence Columbus had learned about originated with the actions of Americans or the American environment itself. That is, the most concrete evidence that land lay directly to the west of Europe and the offshore islands, such as the Azores, was derived from the drifting of American seacraft to the Azores, from the discovery of American bodies washed ashore, and from the arrival of carved wood and natural objects, driftwood, logs, seeds, reeds, and debris, driven by currents and winds from the west. Columbus learned of them secondhand. He did not see them himself, but learned of them from other persons. So we've gone over this again. A lot of things ended up in Europe because they got stuck in the currents and ended up over there from the Americas. You know, we even got a story of in Roman times, right? That Indians went in so-called Roman times, right? In these ages, possibly medieval ages, because Rome most likely was in the medieval ages. We're learning with the new chronology, right? But either way, American Indians were going that way for a long time. They already knew there was American Indians and people coming out of the Atlantic. Columbus also read books such as Historia Rerum Ubique Gestarum of Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini, or Pius II. Are we just talking about Piso? One of the Pisos, one of his pen names? That Indians had been driven by storms to Europe. This was important evidence to him. He wrote in the margins of the copy of Historia Rerum, opposite the reference to Indian vessels reaching Germany with people and merchandise. Si esset maximum distantiam non putissem venire cum fortunam. And it goes on, right? Translated, if it was an extremely great distance between India and Germany, the vessels could not pass without ill fortune, but this proves it is near at hand. This remark shows that Columbus was carefully studying Aeneas Historia as part of his examination of the feasibility of sailing westward to Asia. It also proved that Columbus was quite interested in the evidence that Indians could sail to the coast of Europe. But what a difference between reading of that in a book and actually seeing Indians in the flesh with one's own eyes. Columbus wrote also in the margins of Piccolomini's Historia Rerum the following incredibly significant comment: Homines de Katayo versus Oriens venierent. All right, and it keeps going. All of Columbus' notes in Piccolomini's Historia Rerum were written in a very late Latin, with terms that are not always clear. But the first part of the preceding notes reads unmistakably: people from Katayo came toward the east, the original Cathay in the Americas. We saw many notable things, and specifically in Galway, Ireland, a man and a wife. The note then goes on to use late Latin terms that are presented in almost shorthand manner and that have been interpreted variously. One author translates in duabus lignis areptus ex mirabili persona, and it keeps going in Latin, right? That is, two persons hung on the two wrecks, a man and a woman, a superb creature. Another author translates the same phrase quite differently as un hombre et una femelle de grande taille, and it keeps going, or a man and a woman of great stature, right? What do they find in the mounds buried? Giants, right? 7, 8 foot tall, giant stature here, or well built in boats adrift. Samuel Eliot Morison presents us with still a different interpretation as a man and a woman taken in two small boats of wondrous aspect. A fourth translator states, hombres de Katayo vinieron al oriente. So it keeps going in Spanish. People from Cathay came to the east. We have seen many notable things, and especially in Galway in Ireland, a man and a woman on some wood dragged by the storm of admirable form. The problem with Columbus Latin is that duabus lignis means literally with two woods, or with two timbers or logs. Lignis does not specifically mean either boat or wreck. The most logical conclusion is that lignis was used to refer to two dugout logs, to Native American style piraguas or canoas, as found from South America northward to Virginia and Massachusetts. Europeans would have lacked a word other than log to describe a solid wood boat. Columbus later used the Arab term almadia for such craft. Incidentally, this use of lignis confirms that the people of Katayo were indeed from America, and not flat-faced Finns or Lapps, as Morison suggested. People from the north would not have been going in an easterly direction, and they would not have had log boats. Moreover, they would not have been drifting on logs either, since the currents of that area came from America to Galway, Ireland, and would have carried any Sami or Finnish drifters to the far north of Norway, not to Ireland. So big one right there. And we've shown that the currents are much stronger going from America to Europe and Africa, and it's 4 times as hard going the other way around. And here's an image they got here of them building a canoe, right? A complete translation has to also deal with the term areptis, which might be related to repto or creep or crawl, or it is the equivalent of Spanish arrastrar, to drag, but which more likely is related to areptum, to get into one's possession. Thus, the complete text of Columbus should read, people from Katayo towards the east they came. We saw many notable things, and especially in Galway, Ireland, of a man and a wife with 2 dugout logs in their possession of marvelous form. This then is perhaps the most exciting piece of writing ever composed by Columbus, and one of the most significant paragraphs in the history of the Atlantic world. With this, we have solid, indisputable evidence that Columbus and others had seen Native Americans at Galway, on the west coast of Ireland, and that the Americans had arrived from the west going toward the east. Columbus probably saw the Americans in 1477, and it seems very likely that this was the event that compelled him, a few years later, to begin actively preparing for a voyage to the west. And not only that, right, what also happened in 1492, the Inquisition. So that's when he had to do it. If he had any plans to come, that's when he actually had to do it. He had no more time to waste. Why? Because he was a Sephardic Jew. All right. Here's another image. These are drawings. The visit then of the Americans to Galway in the 1470s was no mere isolated incident. It forms part of the chain of causation leading directly to the 1492 Columbus voyage, and indeed forms one of the most important links in that chain, because it was Columbus' only first-hand experience of America prior to 1492. But of course, Columbus referred to the people he saw at Galway as being from Katayo or Cathay. Again, reference 42, the Drop Radio, his Prester John investigation, his series he got, and a lot of, corroboration to let you know where the true Cathay was, the original. He did not call them Indians, although from the location of his note in the Historia Rerum, it is clear that he was thinking of Indians when he wrote about people from Katayo. All right, here's more corroboration to what Drop is saying. When they were saying Cathay back in these times, they meant Americans in a place in America, since he had been discussing the early arrival of Indians in Germany immediately before. Let us now proceed to examine what Columbus meant by Katayo, as well as determine when he made his visit to Galway and when he wrote his comments in the margin of the Historia Rerum. And we got another drawing here, right? It has generally been supposed that Columbus visited Galway in 1477, because he himself states that he sailed northward to the vicinity of Thule, Iceland, in February of that year. All right, did you guys know that? Segundo de Ipisua supposes that the Galway visit occurred in 1472, but this is unlikely as Colombo is witness to a will in Italy on March 20, 1472, and on August 26, he contracted with a wool merchant there. Almost a year later, we again learn of him joining with his family in the sale of a horse. There are gaps from the fall of 1470 through early March 1472, but he would have been only 19 to 21 years old and very possibly was learning the weaver's trade rather than that of a sailor. It is much more likely that Colombo sailed to northern waters only after being shipwrecked in Portugal in the summer of 1476, since the Portuguese had a well-established trade with Galway. Now again, Columbus was Portuguese. He's a Sephardic Jew from Portugal. So there are a lot of conjectures. There's still in this book, and this time, Jack Forbes is still going that he was an Italian. He doesn't know, he hasn't studied this, and during this time he wrote this book. Moreover, the Genoese, he's not Genoese, a Portuguese Jew, do not seem to have traded directly with Galway, and their shipping was at risk due to the same kind of naval battle that had resulted in Colon swimming to the Portuguese coast. All right, so check it out. But the Portuguese were trading with Galway, so this makes even more sense that he was Portuguese. Morrison asserts that there is no reason to doubt that Columbus made a voyage to Galway and Iceland in the winter of 1476, 1477, and returned to Lisbon by spring. Columbus was probably only a common seaman in early 1476, and most likely went to Galway and Thule in the same capacity. In 1478, he was placed in charge of a shipment of sugar to the Madeira Islands. All right, and again, who was in charge of the sugar producing and plantations before even going to the Americas and then establishing them in the Americas? That was Sephardic Jews. So it makes sense that he was in charge of a shipment of sugar to the Madeira Islands, where a lot of the Portuguese Jews, Sephardic Jews, Muslim Moors were living, trading with, going, also being sent to during the Inquisition, indicating perhaps some literacy. In later years, he learned to read and write in Latin and Castilian, but we can be reasonably certain that he took no written notes of Galway and that he depended upon memory for the note he made probably 4 years later. It seems likely that Colombo became interested in exploration and cosmography after his visit to Galway and Thule, and after living in the Madeira Islands and Lisbon between 1478 and the early 1480s. Again, so-called Columbus, Salvador Fernandes Zarco, was Portuguese, guys. Let's just remember this as we're reading this, all right? But it was probably after he moved to Lisbon that he began to acquire books to make notes in their margins. According to Morrison, he was ready to make his first proposals to the kings of Portugal in 1484 and 1485. By 1486, he was ready to present his arguments to Spanish officialdom. Of course, he continued to do research until January 9, 1492, when the Spanish sovereigns finally accepted his plan, as well as later. A first solid evidence of Columbus' investigation occurs in relation to his engaging in correspondence with Paolo del Pozzo Toscanelli, an Italian physician and cosmographer who accepted the reports of Marco Polo to the effect that Asia extended eastward. Listen to this, guys. Asia extended eastward for a far greater distance than had been previously believed. And that's what I've been trying to tell you. Where did Marco Polo really go? Marco Polo came to the Americas, guys. They haven't found where Marco Polo went. They can't prove it. That's because he came all the way to the Americas, where he went and found the king of Cathay and all this, all these magnificent palaces and this mighty king. Yeah, they never told you America was the farthest east, as it's saying here. It extended far greater distance than previously believed. Columbus was also able to obtain an introduction to Toscanelli, and the latter sent him a copy of his letter of 1474 to Fernando Martins, the contents of which relate directly to Columbus' later ideas about Katayo and Cipango, Japan. So was Cipango really always Japan? We got maps of ancient America where they're showing Cipango. Morrison states that the correspondence with Toscanelli had to have been concluded before May 1482, when the latter died. It is significant that Columbus' annotations make frequent reference to the Great Khan, the Gran Khan, Gran Canyon. Who we talking about, Prester John? Who we talking about, King David? The ruler of the Mongol Empire that included all of China and surrounding regions. And to Katayo, all right, he wasn't even just a ruler of Mongol. Mongol didn't even exist like that. It wasn't a country or a place. Mongol meant great or great empire, guys. So again, we got to dodge the hijack a little bit here. This is very old 90s kind of mentality still. I think this is when he wrote this. For example, there are at least 18 specific marginal notes on the Great Khan. Thus, the report of Marco Polo, partly and interpreted by Toscanelli, were apparently in Columbus' mind when he made his margin notes. And again, Marco Polo came to the Americas. That's where he met the Grand Khan, or the great king, priest king. That's what it means. Khan means priest king. It don't mean Mongol. The most important books written by Columbus were Pierre de Ailis, Imago Mundi, and Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini's Historia Rerum Ubique Gestarum. Piccolomini's work was first published in Venice in 1477, and Columbus' copy was of that of first edition. Pierre de Ailis' Imago Mundi was probably first printed in 1480 to 83, although written in 1410 to 1414, and available in manuscript copies at libraries before 1480. Columbus' copy had no date of publication, but one annotation within refers to this year of 1484, which leads one to affirm that the copy was obtained at least by that year. Because Columbus had the reputation of being a bookseller, we might assume that he obtained his Imago Mundi as soon as it was printed, between 1480 and 1483. It seems quite likely that Columbus wrote most of all his marginal notes in Piccolomini's prior to about 1485, while his copy of De Ailis was still being written up to 1488 and even 1491 in one case. All notes in these books precede his voyage of 1492, although certain other books were being written in after his voyages to the Caribbean. I believe that the note on Galway was written before he had an opportunity to study the Toscanelli letter of 1474, received presumably by 1482. This is because it can be argued that Columbus, thinking about the Indies, the term already used in 1375 on the famous Catalan map, listen, they already knew about the Indies, went through two major phases: A, Great Khan Katayo phase, and 2, a Great Khan Katayo Cipango phase. The Catalan map of 1375 gives great prominence to Katayo. It makes it the most important feature of East India. Again, Yucatan, Katayo, Katan, Cathay, Katan, Yucatan, Yoktan, a son of Eber. A son of Eber, yeah, Yoktan, Yucatan, Katan, Katayo. Cipango is not shown. Columbus notes in both Piccolomini and De Ali's referred to Great Khan 18 times in Piccolomini, to Katayum and Katayo, to Ceres, a synonym for Katayo or China. So now, in modern times, Cathay, they're trying to put it in China, and they say it became China. China wasn't even called China. It was with an S-I, right? S-I-N-A, Sinai, to India, and to India's geographical relationship to Spain, and to other parts of Asia. But Cipango, and they're saying Cipango is Japan, but not in old maps. It was in America. It's not a feature of any of the notes for these two books. And even though the Ali's does make a reference to the island of Cipango or Cipango, this then constitute Columbus' first phase, when he was interested primarily in Katayo and India. Remember, North America is India. And again, I just want to remind you of the other book we were reading about, how, and this is in the Researches into the Lost History of the Americas, that whole book we're reading, how they compare, how they're telling you Pan, when it has to do with the deity Pan of the Greeks and the Romans and all these people, they were dealing with America. Pan was in America. So see, Pango, Panama, right? That was related to the Americas. The Zodiacs prove it. It is known that Columbus was studying his copy of Piccolomini's in 1481 when he wrote that year as a current date in the margin. I believe that it is at that time also that he wrote the note about Galway, because presumably by 1482, he had received a copy of the Toscanelli letter to Martins. A copy of the letter in Columbus' handwriting was found in the copy of Piccolomini's Historia Rerum, and both are now located in the Biblioteca Colombina of Sevilla, as are his other books, right? His other books are in this library. We've gone over which one, and I'm talking about the Book of Prophecies that he wrote, which tells you that he came to America, right, to recover the holy city and Mount Zion. He literally wrote that, guys. In the letter, Toscanelli refers to a chart that he had drawn showing Satan as a major port, as it did the Catalan map of 1375, in the region of the Great Khan. The Grand Khan, Grand Canyon, his seat and residence is for the most part in the province of Cathay. He goes on to state, from the city of Lisbon westward in a straight line to the very noble city of Quinsay, Hangzhou, 26 spaces are indicated on the chart. This city in the province of Manji, evidently in the vicinity of the province of Cathay, and which is the royal residence of the country. But from the island of Antillia, a mythical island. Now remember what we learned about the Antillia and how it was drawn. It was literally the eastern part of North America. The Antillia was from the Mississippi to the Atlantic up to the Susquehanna River on the top, and in the bottom, the Gulf of Mexico, guys. So I see how you're saying it's a mythical island. No, it was real. It's in these old maps. It was depicting the eastern part of North America. We've gone over this. Check out the video. Known to you to the farmed land of Cipango. See, now they're saying Antillia is Cipango, and I told you that was dealing with America, and they're saying they're trying to say Japan here. So again, this is from them writing. This is Columbus notes. There are 10 spaces. That island is very rich in gold, pearls, and gems. They roof the temples and royal houses with solid gold. So there is not a great space to be traversed over unknown waters. All right, so this is very important right here, how they're describing some of the temples. We had this, guys, in America. We had roofs and temples of royal houses with solid gold. The Spanish described that when they got here in the primary sources we've read. I've gone over that with you guys. Same thing. The Toscanelli Martin's letter probably led Colon into his second phase, one where Cipango became almost as important as Katayo, as an objective, and where provinces and cities such as Manji, Satan, and Quinsay were frequently on his mind. So I know Why is he trying to say Asia is America? Guys, I'm trying to tell you, they were talking about the Americas. Even though modern places are named a certain thing, doesn't mean they were always that ancient place just because modern places are named that. That's how they rewrite history. That's how they try to fit their narratives. This was the phase he was enduring his voyage of 1492 to 1504. I believe that Columbus stated that the Americans whom he met in Galway in 1477 were from Katayo because at that time the note was written, he was thinking of Katayo as being the most prominent place directly to the west of Ireland and Spain. What's directly to the west of Ireland and Spain, guys? The Americas. After 1482, one could argue that he might well have referred to the Americans as being from Cipango, because that island, and remember, Cipango was supposed to be the Antilles. We know Antilles was the eastern half. You know, when it comes to the way they drew that island, that so-called mythical island, they were actually depicting the eastern half of North America. All the geographical features, the rivers, everything, Florida sticking out, everything is there. Go watch the video I did on this. So he's like, maybe it is Cipango, because that island, which was supposed to have been very large, was located by Toscanelli as being much closer to Europe. Much closer to Europe. Not all the way over there where China is today or Japan today is, guys. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Empty your cups. All right? We're learning. We're relearning new history, real history. The Martin Banheim globe of 1492, for example, shows a large Cipango island due west of the Madeira, Canary, and Cabo Verde Islands. This is what I was saying. They put it right in America. And about 25% closer to Africa than is Saitan and Manji in the Asian mainland. And he's talking about the modern days today. So it was a lot closer to Europe and Africa. So what I'm telling you guys, they were talking about the Americas. Drifters from the west arriving in Ireland from the Toscanelli Behem perspective could well have come from Cipango, although Behem's map does place Cathay or Katayo exactly due west of Ireland, but at a greater distance to the west. My belief then is that Columbus gave the Americans the origin place of Katayo or China because he was writing that note in 1481 or earlier, and before he had seen the Toscanelli letter with its information about Japan. The only other possibility is that the Americans had stated that they were from a place called Cathay, or some similar sound was uttered. Again, Yucatan, we're from the Yucatan, and that name was seized upon by Colon or others to mean Cathay of Marco Polo and the Great Khan. Marco Polo was right too. See, this is what I'm saying. Marco Polo came here. The word kite, or Kate is very common in Algonquin languages, meaning great. You guys hear that? So there are a number of interesting possibilities that could be explored. For example, Kate Hikan is a term for the ocean. All right? In any case, Columbus believed that the Americans had come from China in the Indies or in Upper India. Again, in where? India Superior. Not China over there. They're talking about ancient Sinai. Sinai. Talking about the Americas, guy. Greater India, India Superior. A place where he very much wanted to go. Now let us see more precisely what Colon believed about Katayo, Cipango, and the Indies, beginning with a review of his margin notes and the Aili. One note that he repeats at several points due to the Ali's text is to the effect that Spain and Portugal, Hispania, or the Iberian Peninsula, right, were very close to the eastern end of India. Come on now. Make it make sense. Talking about the Americas, guys, separated only by a small sea. For example, he wrote that India es propia Hispania. India is near to Spain. Come on now. He wasn't looking for Hindustan, because that's what India today, which was named in the 1900s, guys, it was called Hindustan, and before that it was called Bharat. So if he was talking about Hindustan, he would have known and said Hindustan, and he would have called everybody in the Americas Hindus, not Indians. India Superior was North America. It is part of the Indias, or This is the West Indies, and then we got the East Indies, right? In medieval times, there was three Indias, guys. There was three Indias. And that from the extremity of Spain to the commencement of India is not of great distance. It's right there, right across the Atlantic. That's what he was saying. Also that, and it goes on in Latin, I believe, an arm of the sea extends between India and Iberia. Just one sea, the Atlantic. Still further, he knows that Aristotle states that between the end of Iberia and the beginning of India is an easily navigable sea. This idea is repeated, and that's good that he brought this up. So we've read accounts of Aristotle and all these people. They definitely knew of the Americas. We got videos on this, guys. Remember, they're talking about Atlantis. These Greeks, they're calling it Atlantis, right? And I guess they call it India here in one note. But Aristotle and all these people were writing about the Americas too. All these mythical lands, all these mythical places across the Atlantic, they were always talking about the Americas. Use your logic. A whole continent, you think they're not going to know about a whole continent? Other notes relate to the fact that India is immensely large, right? Embracing 44 nations, 118 peoples, and 1/3 part of the habitable world. Come on now. You're telling me that's not America? Columbus wrote also, and in Latin, that the Orient is at an extremity of India, and that the West is properly seen as being at the extremity of Iberia. Or put another way, that India and Iberia are opposite each other. Come on now, India superior, North America. Information about Katayo was also found in the Ali's. Columbus wrote that the kingdom of Tarshish is at the end of the Orient, in the end of Cathay. It was in this country, at the place called Ophir, that Solomon, Jehoshaphat, sent ships. All right, where's the true Gold Coast? Come on now. Thus Cologne confounded Ophir with Katayo, although after 1492 he confused it with Haiti. Which he supposed was Cipango. Body bag for the illusion. Come on now. Shout out to 42 The Draw Radio. He also regarded Katayo as being at the end of the Orient, thus being that part of India, or the Indias, that was closest to Europe. The one that's closest to Europe. Remember, there's three Indias. Columbus' notes in Piccolomini's Historia Rerum include one that seems to reflect his knowledge of the Aelis Imago Mundi. One note in which he states that, in short, it is seen that the commencement of India is opposite to Iberia and Ireland to the north. All right? Again, India superior is North America. We have it on old maps and everything. He also repeats the idea that Strabo and Pliny thought that India was the third part of the world. That is an extremely extended part of the globe. All right? Katayo is also referred in several of Columbus' notes in Piccolomini, in addition to his reference to the people from Katayo seen at Galway. The most significant is one in which he says, Katayum, and it's in Latin, that Katayo is not as far northward as its location on a map is presented. He also states that the Emperor Magnus Khan, the great priest king, rules over a multitude of provinces. King of kings, who's the great Khan? Who's Prester John, huh? Who we talking about? King David, King David? Who we talking about? Middle Ages? Yeah, Middle Ages instead of ancient times. The cities, Chinese, he continues, the cities are of the eastern edge. To the east is unknown land. To the east is unknown land. Here begins a region of Asia. To reach that is China or Katayo is as far as known Asia reaches. Also noted is the idea that Asia and its northern part extends up to be opposite to Tule. I told you, when you go the farthest east, you go into North America. I mean, you guys know already Russia and Alaska's almost touching, but way before it was actually more land connected to Asia and America, North America. Yeah, as you keep going, as it says here, You can reach, right, the farthest known parts of Asia. Where's Asia Major? If there's an Asia Minor, guys, where is Asia Major? I'll wait. If there's an Asia Minor, there has to be a major. Come on now. Here begins a region of Asia to reach. Okay, sorry, I read that already. So, up. Also notice the idea that Asia is the northern part extends up to the opposite of Thule, Iceland, and that the east is without an end, terminus. It doesn't end, it keeps going. Columbus also wrote a note to the effect that the empire of the Great Khan extended to the Ichthys River, to the Bactrians, and to other peoples as far as India. But most significant of all of Columbus' marginal notes, in which Piccolomini refers to Indians reaching Germany in the Middle Ages, there he writes, after noting Piccolomini's statement that the Northern Ocean in its entirety is navigable. Author Docet, and it keeps going in Latin, the author tells of the discovery in Germany of the Indian ships with people and merchandise. Then Columbus proceeds to write the note that I translated at the beginning of this chapter, to the effect that the distance was not great between India and Europe, following that he referred to his encounter with the people of Katayo at Galway. Taken together, the preceding evidence clearly shows Columbus believed that the Indians of Piccolomini had crossed from Asia directly to Europe. But again, that Asia was Asia Major, America. That's what he saw as Asia, and Cathay and Cipango. This is what he's trying to point out here, guys. Going eastward across a combined Pacific Atlantic Ocean, and the distance involved was not great because India and Europe faced each other across a relatively small body of water. In the same manner, he believed the Americans of Galway were people from a part of Asia called Katayo, Katayo, Yucatan, and was also directly across from Europe. Directly across from Europe. What's there, guys? The Americas, right? Let's not beat around the bush. In this, he was confirmed by their arrival from the west, the only direction in which people can come if they are drifting to the west coast of Ireland. It seems clear that Columbus took Piccolomini's Historia Rerum very seriously indeed. One of Columbus' extremely important notes, wherein he states that India was opposite Iberia and Ireland, and which includes his drawing of a point in hand, is immediately preceded by this telling information that en route to the Chinese cities, one would encounter the Anthrophagos, a people rude and barbarous, and an impenetrable land near a mountain called Tabing that dominates the sea. Beyond, very far from the coast of cities, one finds a people very peaceful. Thus, Columbus already knew that both peaceful and human-eating peoples could be found near China, or he's talking about America, before he ever reached the Caribbean. Little wonder, then, that he invented the timid Arawaks and cannibal caribs on his very first journey. Dash the hijack. Perhaps by now the reader will have begun to share Columbus' picture of the world as he studied the writings of D'Ailly and Piccolomini, a world in which the existence of the Americas and of the immense breadth of the Pacific were both unknown to European thinkers, and where the size of the oceans was made smaller by Columbus' miscalculation of the circumference of the globe. Dash the hijack, many people in Europe already knew about the Americas. To fully comprehend Columbus' ideas about Katayo, we must, however, proceed to examine the evidence of his own 1492 diary, as copied by some unknown person, and then presented by Bartolome de las Casas in letters. First, let us begin by documenting Columbus' use of the term India and Indias, along with Indio, for the inhabitants thereof. As has already been noted, the term the Indies has already appeared on the Catalan map of 1375. You guys hear that, right? A usage made appropriate by the concept that several Indias, remember, several Indias, there was 3 Indias in medieval times, or parts of India existed, such as India Superior, okay, that's North America, India Meridional, India Extra, Kankem, etc. As noted previously, India embraced many nations and peoples lying to the east of the river Indus or Indos. At the beginning of his journal, Columbus wrote the king and queen of Castilla that You thought of sending me, Christopher Columbus, to the said regions of India by the route of the west, by which route we do not know for certain that anyone previously has passed. So after having expelled all the Jews, your Highness commanded me to go to the said regions of India. All right, so remember, he was a Sephardic Jew from Portugal. And I took the route to your Highness's Canary Islands in order from there to take my course and sail so far that I would reach the Indies. All right, again, West Indies, East Indies, right? It is conceivable that this language may have been subsequently altered by Las Casas, but we can reserve judgment until after examining other references. On October 12, 1492, Las Casas states, they reached an islet of the Lucayas, which was called Guanahani in the language of the Indians, lengua de indios. Soon they saw naked people. Dodge the hijack. Clearly this was written later by Las Casas, since Columbus could not have known such information on his first day of arrival. But on October 17, Columbus' own words are seemingly presented when he makes reference to todos esos indios que traigo, meaning all these Indians whom I bring, having kidnapped some. Remember, he kidnapped and brought and enslaved many Indians and brought them to Lisbon, to Spain, and to the Cape Verde Islands. And a tres de estos indios, 3 of these Indians whom he had placed on board the ship Pinta. Thereafter, Columbus makes frequent use of the term Indio. Thus, the first clear use of the term Indio by Columbus to refer to Americans arises in connection with his having forcibly kidnapped 7 that I caused to be taken in order to carry them away. The use of the term Indio by Columbus indicates, of course, that he believed the islands they had reached were part of India. Shortly thereafter, Columbus makes reference to estas Indias, or these Indias, which is his first use of the plural form after the introduction to the journal cited above. On November 12, he writes of having kidnapped 7 cabezas de mujeres, 7 head of women, and 3 children. And also these women will teach much to our men, or ours, their language, which is all one in all these islands of India. A few days later, Colon saw large rats of those India also, and made another reference to estas Indias. Finally, near the conclusion of the voyage, Columbus remarks that these Indies are very near the Canary Islands. Thus, he certainly believed that he had reached a region that he could refer to as either India or Indias, and that the people contacted were Indios. As Columbus approached the Azores in February 1493, he wrote 2 letters. The first to Luis Santangel, counselor to the king and queen. And remember, this is the guy who actually funded these trips, especially the first one, and he was a Sephardic Jew. States that I have passed to the Indias with this fleet, where I have found many islands populated by people without number. The first island, the Indians called Guanahani. The 5th island I called Guana, Cuba. And I found it so large that I thought that it would be firm land, a continent, the province of Katayo. He then sent 2 men by land to see if a king or great city could be found, but none was seen. So Columbus concluded that Cuba was an island as the Indios had been telling him. Later he referred to how, when he first arrived a Las Indias, he captured by force some native people, and how the Americans of an island at the entrance of Las Indias were ferocious, the Caribs of the Lesser Antilles, and used canoes to rob all the islands of India. Essentially, the same information was repeated in a letter to Gabriel Sanchez, which was soon published in Rome in Latin before the end of 1493, giving the first printed news about the Indies in Europe. Thus, Columbus confirmed his usage from the diary, asserting that he had reached the islands of India, or the Indias, and that the people were Indios. He also stated in his letter that he believed initially that Cuba was part of the province of Katayo. Let us follow up on this detail by reviewing what his journal has to say about Katayo and Cipango. Now, again, I just want to remind you guys, the country of India today was not even named India back then. It didn't get named India until the 1900s. It was called Hindustan. So he didn't think he was in the India of today. That's what a lot of people think. And that's wrong concept. Again, North America and the Americas is India superior. in ancient times. On October 6, being far out in the Atlantic following a westerly course, Columbus was advised by Martin Alonso Pinzon to steer southwest by west. Las Casas write that to Colon it seemed that Pinzon said this because of the island of Cipango, and the admiral saw that if they missed it, they would not be able to strike land so quickly, and that it was better to go at once to the mainland and afterward to the islands. Columbus continued west for another day, but on the 9th he veered to the southwest and west-southwest for several days. Thus it is not clear if he decided to try to reach Cipango or to go to the continent of Asia itself. After reaching the Kayo, Bahama Islands, Columbus states, "I want to go see if I can find the island of Cipango." A few days later he writes, "And afterwards I will leave for another very large island that I believe must be Cipango, and which they call Colba, Cuba. In it they say there are many and very large ships and many traders, and from this island I will go to another which they call Bohio or Haiti. But I have already decided to go to the mainland and to the city of Quinsay, and to give the letters of your highness to the Grand Khan. Thus Columbus initially thought that Cuba was Cipango. Listen, and that he could go from there to Asia, where the city of Quinsay and the great Khan of Katayo could be found. Thus he believed that he had entered the Indies to the north of Cipango. On October 23rd, Columbus wrote, "I should like to leave today for the island of Cuba, which I believe ought to be Cipango." All right? You guys hearing? Later he said that I believe that, according to the signs that all the Indians of these islands make, that Cuba is the island of Cipango. And in Las Casas' words, the Indians that he brought said that from the islands to Cuba was a journey of a day and a half in their Almarias boats. He left there for Cuba because from the signs that the Indians gave him of the size and of its gold and pearls, he thought it must be Cipango. When the Spaniards reached Cuba, Las Casas noted that the admiral understood that the large ships from the Grand Khan came there, and that from there to Tierra Firme was a journey of 10 days. After being in Cuba for a time, the captain of the Pinta, Martin Alonso Pinzon, learned that there was a city called Cuba 4 days away, and that that land was mainland of great extent, and that the king of that land used to have war with the great Khan, whom they call Cami, and his land or Ciudad Faba, Habana. The admiral then decided to send emissaries with a letter to the king of the land, already referred to in Colon's letter to Santangel. Las Casas adds, and he, Columbus, says that he must strive to go to the Grand Khan, whom he thought was somewhere around there, or to the city of Cathay, which of the great Khan, which he says is very large according to what he was told before he left Spain. To summarize, Columbus initially believed that Cuba was Cipango, all right? I told you that was in America. But he became increasingly confused over the information that Cuba extended to, or was part of, a very large landmass, instead of being 10 days, travel away from one. He probably had learned of the existence of Florida and North America, but he wasn't sure if Cuba was an island or connected to that continent. If Cuba was an island, it could be Cipango, but if it was firm land, then it had to be part of Katayo or Asia. As we shall see, Columbus soon transformed Haiti into Cipango because of his uncertainties about Cuba and because of the gold acquired from the Americans of Haiti. In any case, Columbus convinced himself that the native Cubans he had contacted were at war with the great Khan's people, and that this Tierra Firme and that I am, he says, off Sato and Quise, 100 leagues more or less from one and from the other. Again, Columbus sent out messengers to try to locate a local king. Las Casas stated that in spite of the failure of that mission, Columbus, still affirmed that the island of Cuba is Tierra Firme. Columbus had many wild ideas, including one of utilizing the Americans' cotton. All right, listen. Using the Americans' cotton, they were growing cotton since ancient times. We're talking about real ancient times, guys, since 3000, 4000 BC, with Caral Supe, Peru. I think that it would sell very well here without taking it to Spain, but to the big cities belonging to the Grand Khan, which doubtless will be discovered. Columbus subsequently sailed to Haiti, Bohio, noting again his belief that the Great Khan was waging war on the Americans of the region. Las Casas pointed out that Columbus continued up until then to believe that Cuba was part of the mainland. Native Americans allegedly told Columbus that the island of Bohio was larger than Juana, which they call Cuba, and that it is not surrounded by water. And they appeared to mean that here, behind this Hispaniola, which they call Caritaba, there is a landmass of exceedingly large size. Thus, once again, Columbus learned that North American continent, and he also continued to believe for some unexplained reason that the Great Khan was to blame for every report of warfare in the region. By December 24th, Columbus was beginning to relocate Cipango to Bohio, Haiti, both because of evidence of gold and because a region of the island called Cibao. Thus, Cipango, instead of being a very large island, was reduced to a province on an island, at least for a period of time. At the conclusion of his 1492-93 voyage, then Columbus believed Cuba should be Seria, mainland, and part of the province of Katayo, and Bohio, Haiti was Cipango, and a place more convenient and a better place for the mines of gold, and for all trade, as with the mainland of there, as with that of the Great Khan. Our evidence thus is that for Columbus, Katayo consisted in the vicinity of Cuba, or the adjacent North American mainland, whereas Cipango correctly had to lay offshore to the east. One might suggest then that the Americans whom Columbus met at Galway 15 years before were Cubans, or other nearby native people, Arawak, Taino people of the islands, or nearby Floridians or Caribs. This, however, presumed that Colon saw some concrete similarity with their features or watercraft, and it also ignores the Algonquin etymology of kait, as already discussed. On subsequent voyages, Columbus was gradually forced to move Katayo westward to the Central American mainland, while retaining Haiti as Cipango. Nonetheless, on his second voyage, he still believed that Cuba was mainland, although he often was confused by touching upon different sections along the south coast, then sailing northwest in order to find Cathay. According to the opinion of the Lord Admiral, we found that this was a gulf. On June 12th, Columbus had most of his crew sign a statement that Cuba was not an island. Sometime after the second voyage, Columbus wrote a marginal note in Pliny, whose work he had begun finally to study at first hand, to the effect that the island of Haiti, or Ophir, Haiti or Cipango, to which I gave the name of Hispaniola. Thus, he was still convinced that Haiti was Cipango, although virtually no subsequent mapmakers were to agree with him. During his fourth voyage, Columbus wrote, on 13th May, I reached the province of Mago, which borders upon the province of Cathay. This is a reference to his arrival along the coast of Central America, Mago, where he also noted, they tell me that more inland toward Cathay they have them interwoven with gold, with reference to the cotton cloth. He also believed that the Ganges River of India was only 10 days' travel away on the other side of Central America. Columbus' beliefs, as modified by 10 years of exploration, are reflected by two maps attributed to his brother Bartolome Colon, maps that seem to have accompanied a letter sent from Jamaica on July 7, 1503. If these maps, the coast of Central America from Panama to roughly Honduras and Belize are shown as being part of the east coast of Asia, from Malaysia to China, the two versions are drawn slightly differently, one having a more or less north to south coastline, whereas the other has a large landmass or peninsula jutting out eastward in the vicinity of Yucatan. And here we go again, this is what I was saying, Catan, right? Catan, Cathay, Catan, shout out to 432 The Draw Radio. The place names on the Caribbean side of this part of Asia are largely those used by Colon or Columbus on his fourth voyage, although some are misspelled. Veragna for Veragua, Banasa for Banaca Islands, Manao for Maraca, perhaps, etc. The version with the large peninsula facing east has on the left inland the Cerisi or Chinese mountains. Beyond that is Serica, Sinar Magnus, and Sinarum Situs, repeated just to the left of the coast, while a very prominent India extra-Gangan binds the region together with the Malay region, Southeast Asia, and the Ganges River of India. India intra-Gangan lies to the left, north of Tap Bana or Ceylon. The two maps incorporated Colom's revised idea that Katayo or China was located just inland from the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua and Honduras. Interestingly, neither map depicts Cuba at all, thus implying that perhaps Cuba somehow still might connect with a landmass. Cipango is not shown either, but Hispaniola, Haiti, is depicted somewhat inaccurately in relation to Jamaica or Jamaica. The map was apparently prepared by an Italian, judging from these latter two spellings. The map served to tell us that Columbus believed Katayo was still located in the middle region of America, somewhere between Cuba and western Mesoamerica. For Columbus, this area continued to be part of India beyond the Ganges. Come on. 1504, for example, he referred to the island of Jamaica as being en la India. A few mapmakers continued for a time to show that American mainland as being part of Asia, almost precisely as Columbus envisioned it. The globe of Orencio Fineo, 1531, for instance, shows Cathay as being exactly in the location of Mexico in relation to North America and Florida, to which it is connected. To the south, Cathay adjoins Central America. South America alone is called America. Other mapmakers shifted Cathay back to the separate Asia, as did Leonardo da Vinci, circa 1515, with Sepugna or Cipango, Terra Florida, Haiti, and so on, as islands located to the north of a large island continent of South America labeled America. Remember, America Pana? Remember my name? The video, of the origin of the name America, right? A very similar map by Lennox, circa 1512, shows India superior in the area of China, but otherwise is quite similar to Da Vinci's essentially Cathay or India superior, where opposite island in Europe. India superior, opposite island in Europe, right? That's North America, although at quite some distance. Other map makers such as Rosselli, 1506, also had the Provincia Cathay located in northern Asia, while placing Cipango, Cuba, Haiti, and so on as islands out in the middle of the ocean sea. An interesting map by Sebastian Munzer, 16th century, follows the above pattern but places India superior to the northeast of Cathay and Quinsay, and far north of the island Cipango. Thus the notion is set forth that Upper India includes all of East Asia. Justifiably, then, the Chinese and Japanese, as well as the Indonesians could be considered or can be all considered Indians and were called thus the Spaniards and others. The American natives were of course seen by most mapmakers as being completely separated from India, but Spain, following the tradition of Columbus, refused to refer to the native people of the New World or America as Americans or Novomundenses, New Worlders. It was left to the Dutch, French, and other Northern Europeans to call the native people Americans, along with using Indian and such repulsive terms as savages and wildmen. Interestingly, Giovanni de Verrazzano objectives when making his voyage of 1523 was to reach Cathay on the extreme coast of Asia by finding a passage between the troublesome islands of the North American landmass. Needless to state, Columbus' idea of Katayo was very, very different from any of these, since to the time of his death he seems never to have conceived of the vast distance lying between his American Katayo and the real Katayo on the Asian mainland. The real? You mean the duplicate? You mean the copy? What came first? The American Katayo. The Americans whom Columbus met in Galway in circa 1477 were said by him to have come from Katayo. We now know that Columbus meant by Katayo and how it remained one of his major objectives through all of his voyages. It is of great interest that Columbus never returned to that page of Piccolomini's Historia Rerum to alter his original entry. The Americans of Galway always remained from Katayo, and Katayo always remained just beyond Columbus' port of call in Caribbean America, okay? Cathay was in where? In the Caribbean to Columbus, and he never changed his mind, all right? Again, America's the true old world, guys. And this has major drop right here, and they try to alter the history to fit the false narratives later on. And that is the end of chapter 1, guys. All right, as you guys can see, we're going to go ahead and go into chapter 2 on the next installment of this series, right? I told you we're going to try to read this whole book. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading for today. Again, thanks for tuning in all the way to the end and hearing me read. Hope you guys found this interesting, and you can please, combine this with all the research we've done, so you're not so confused. As you guys can see, Columbus was onto something. America, the true old world. Thanks for tuning in once again. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.